Welcome to the Real Estate Syndication Show. Whether you are a seasoned investor or building a new real estate business, this is the show for you. Whitney Sewell talks to top experts in the business. Our goal is to help you master real estate syndication. And now your host, Whitney Sewell.
This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Today, our guest is Chris Salerno. Thanks for being on the show, Chris.
Thank you, Whitney, for having me.
No, I'm honored to have you on the show. It's been great to get to know you over the last, quite a few months now. We've seen each other at numerous conferences and a couple other funny stories that maybe we'll share part of. I'm not sure. But anyway, it's, we don't live that far apart either. So, but anyway, great to get to know you and meet somebody that's as motivated and driven as you and that I can learn from as well. But a little about Chris. He's a principal of QC Capital Group. And by the time he was 24, had sold more than $40 million in real estate and helped lead the #1 real estate team in the Carolinas. Named Charlotte's 30 under 30, Chris's vision has led QC Capital to quickly become a well-respected, high-return investment firm. So, Chris, thank you again. You're obviously very qualified. Be on the show. We're looking forward to just learning from you. But give the listeners a little more about who you are and what your focus is.
Yeah, Whitney, thank you very much for having me. Very excited to be on the show. So I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. I've been here over 13 years. I got my foot in the door by selling residential real estate. Very quickly gained a success track record, which landed me in the position to leading the #1 team, making them 46% profitable in 1 year compared to their 3 years of just being stagnant. From there, I realized that to reach my goals, you have to own real estate. And we've all played a game, and I actually played the game last night with my family, and it's called Monopoly. And I was teaching the younger one who's 6, her name's Chloe. I was teaching her what you're supposed to do is buy up all the land, put the hotels on it, apartments, I like to say, put the apartments on it, and then when I land on it, reap the cash flow from it. So I realized that that's what you have to do in real life to build that financial freedom and to build the wealth. So very quickly, I started studying multifamily for about a year and a half before I ended up hiring my coach. And once I hired my coach, that's a month later, I got into multifamily full time and been doing it ever since. So that's a little background story about myself.
Nice. I'll never forget. I think one of the first times we talked, I was impressed just at how driven you were. We talked about how, you slept like 4 hours a night, I think,
Yep.
and like how, you were just able to keep this drive going.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, it's impressive. But obviously, $40 million real estate, by the time you were 24, it just shows, how driven you were. But let's get into, a little bit about your focus now. I know you said, residential real estate, but now you've moved to multifamily and now you've hired a coach. And, I've seen your business, moving forward but now, let's get into a little bit about, what market are you looking in now and how are you continuing to grow this through these strategic relationships as well?
Yeah, great question. So the market I'm focusing on is heavily on Charlotte, North Carolina. A lot of people don't know it's the second biggest financial district in the United States, right behind Manhattan. So we have a lot of job growth, and the price of living here is very low. Plus, I've been here over 13 years, and I know this market better than anyone. So our main focus is heavily on the Charlotte market, and I feel that that's an extra service that I can give to my investors. Actually, this Saturday, we closed on a property last Friday. This Saturday, I have an investor coming down, and I'm giving her the whole tour of Charlotte and the property as well. So I want to make sure that our investors are getting that full service with me knowing my market. And it's also good to live in the market I invest in. One, I'm 30 minutes from each property with traffic a little more. Also, in a market shift or market correction, I am right here. I've been in Charlotte since 2007, so I've been in the last market correction here in Charlotte. And living in the market that you invest in, what you can do to that property during a market correction. So my main focus is very heavily on the Carolina market, but extremely heavily focused down on the Charlotte market because I live here. And I think any career we had in the past definitely has molded us for the career that you're currently in. So with me being in my previous residential real estate brokerage and being a broker, I know how to speak to the commercial brokers that are here in the Carolinas. So I built great relationships with the commercial brokers where they will present us an off-market deal, and they will give us a lot more information about the property than anyone else. So the previous property we closed last Friday was off-market, and it was presented to us through broker relationships.
Okay, well, let's dive into that a little bit.
Yeah.
These broker relationships are very important, and relationships in general in this business are what makes it. And so, but in this case, you were presented an off-market 44-unit deal that you were able to close on because of this broker relationship. But let's back up. How did you develop this relationship, and how did you, how were you top of mind with this broker? But let's go way back.
Yeah, great question. So I always think of opportunity. And I always like to say, Whitney, if you and I were sitting at a table and I had a Starbucks cup in the middle, you would see that cup differently than I would. So every situation or every opportunity, I try to see it from a circle table in each type of chair. So I'm analyzing the opportunity or the situation the same or differently to come out with an outcome. So we were actually, I was emailing him back and forth. A property came on the market, which was 91 units. And our criteria is B and C assets over 100 units. So this was 91 units. We were touring the asset. Once we were finishing with the tour, I looked at him and I said, the adjacent property is at the same owner. And all you had to do was just knock down a fence and you can create a path and a 2-lane path, and then you have 135 units. So he said, no, it wasn't. I said, well, would they be willing to package the whole deal to make it 135? He said, I'll get back to you. He got back to me that afternoon. He says, yes. Unfortunately, I lost in best and final because I did not feel comfortable moving my offer price up for our investors. Numbers just didn't make sense. So I didn't feel comfortable and lost in best and final in the 91. A couple days later, I called the broker back and said, is the 44 unit still available? He said, let me check. He said, yes, it is. So then we started that process there and ended up acquiring the 44 units actually at a lower price per door than the 91 units. And the good thing is that the 44 units are all 2-2s, where the 91 was a mixture of 1-1s and 2-1s. So we actually got a better deal. And very pleased for our returns for our investors on that.
So it sounds like you had an idea here that it wasn't really presented at first. He was showing you this 91 unit, but then you see this opportunity, this apartment complex right next door, this 44 units. You lost in best and final, but then, what sounded like was key was also you followed up. Well, what about that one? You started asking questions, right? And so, you had an idea there. What about that one? And, and then the broker followed up and wow, you all made it happen.
Yeah. Staying consistent and follow up is a very big, even in, I've seen it even in the residential side. I used to coach residential agents around the United States and give small seminars to salespeople. And the biggest thing I would preach is that follow up and stay consistent with it. And you'll eventually get it.
So had you known this broker a long time?
Not a long time, believe it or not. But once I started making that transition by studying multifamily at the beginning of 2008, I knew that brokers make the decision. And especially when there's multiple offers on a property, the brokers will end up making the decision by saying, oh, I've worked with Chris with QC Capital. They know they've closed before and it was a very smooth transaction. So the sellers will end up more than likely picking our LOI. So I knew that I had to build the relationships with the brokers. So mid 2018, before I jumped full time into multifamily, I started building relationships with the Carolina brokers around town.
Okay. So let's talk about this specific relationship. He brings you this deal. Obviously, you see this other apartment complex next door. We went through that a little bit. But what does that relationship look like? How are you staying top of mind with him? And, and him, just showing that, okay, you're a closer, you mean business, you're not just a tire kicker. What were you doing?
The biggest thing is that with me being on the younger side, they know these brokers here are also younger in the Carolinas, and they know they have the next 100 transactions with me. They also see my drive and my motivation and my positive mindset. which I think that was a big help on the final buyer call when I was speaking to the sellers with my drive and my mindset. And in regards to that, I think that's definitely helped build the relationships with the brokers so they feel comfortable moving forward. And now, because the deal's already closed, I'm following up with them once a week. Hey, have you anything come across your desk? Let's grab coffee. Hope all is well. So that's the biggest thing, is just because that deal is closed doesn't mean I'm going to stay top of mind to him when he has an off market come to him. So I always like to just email him. And actually, midway between that transaction, those sellers brought me another off market deal. But it was just too low of units for me to acquire. But now I am those sellers are local developers here in Charlotte as well. So I built that relationship with them, and then also the broker who I'm going to stay consistently following up with.
Nice. You said once a week.
Yes, once a week.
So how are you tracking that?
I'm tracking it through the old way, Excel spreadsheet, and the best thing in text message as well. I'll have a notification reminder to make sure that I am reaching out to these certain individuals once a week.
A text message reminder. Is that something like you schedule it to yourself, or I just wonder like how you're doing that?
Yeah. So what I'll do is I'll do a regular meeting reminder saying I have a meeting with so-and-so. Okay. And then in there I'll say, shoot them a text or a call. So I can make sure I stay on top of mind and follow up consistently.
Nice.
Hold myself accountable.
So, other than maybe the following up once a week, how are you standing out from somebody else that's maybe contacting the same broker weekly?
Yeah, great question. Really just making sure I'm top of mind with him by talking to him, seeing if he has any deals, building that relationship with him, not just talking real estate with him. Talking about his family, talking about what he's done last weekend, his last week, any new deals he's came across, any issues he's seeing out there in the market in regards to multifamily. Because in my opinion, these brokers are market experts. It's always great to get their opinion on what other properties will trade for, even though if they don't have that listing. Just to ask them, hey, I saw this property trade for $26 million. What's your thoughts on that? Just to tap into it and build that relationship. I think I'm very good at building relationships, and I've built great relationships with our investors as well. So I think that separates me from my other competition. Also, they know they have 100 more transactions with me, and I'm going to be in this industry for 100 more years. So they like that they know they can come to me, and we have 100 more deals to do together.
Nice. So, obviously, while broker relationships are extremely important, also this investor relationship piece is just as important. And I liked how you mentioned earlier, like this investor's coming down, you're going to give them a tour of the market, and really allow yourself to shine a little bit, right? In your knowledge of the market and that you're living there and all these things that you know about Charlotte. But I guess, let's go into how you are nurturing those relationships, with, potential investors or even previous ones as well.
Yeah, great question. So I have one main investor who helped me acquire this property here in Charlotte, North Carolina, by trust. I started just like Joe Fairless with no money down. He actually gave me a personal line of credit of a loan of $220,000 for my earnest money to put down on this property. And the funny thing is that when I sold residential real estate, it took me 8 months to even talk to this gentleman, but I kept up with it. Every 2 weeks I would call him and leave him a voicemail and shoot him a text. But come to find out, he's a high executive in a public company that he just travels 3 weeks out of the month, where he just did not have time to answer my phone call, but eventually did. Sold him a couple residential rentals, and then from there, right when I was making my transition, I started giving him my knowledge about multifamily, and he knew that I was a real estate guy here in Charlotte. So then that's when he started to invest with me throughout multifamily here in Charlotte. So building that relationship, staying on top of it, making sure and just checking in with the investors as well. I know.
So I wanted to back up a little bit there. It took you 8 months to get to talk to this individual, right? But even before that, how did you know that this was somebody you wanted to, spend that kind of time and effort with, trying to get this relationship built?
Well, he was when I was sold residential, he was pursuing a higher end type of condo close to $1 million. So that right there, I knew that I didn't know back then what accredited investor was, but I've known him for 3 years. But that right there, I knew that this was a serious guy. By the way he typed his email, the questions he asked about the property, and I knew he was a serious guy. So that's when I started reaching out to him. And come to find out, he bought 4 properties from me when I sold residential, and he has them all as rentals. And then when we made that transition, he says, I can't stand single family rentals or condo rentals. And then when I started giving him the knowledge on multifamily and how you can scale on multifamily and the tax benefits, because he's a high executive, that just a light came on, and he now loves it.
8 months, leaving a message every couple of weeks. That's impressive.
Yeah.
So what was the first conversation like? My goodness, Chris, who are you? And why don't you leave me alone?
I used to get that a lot when I sold residential real estate. The conversation, I was just, hey, my name's Chris Salerno. And I noticed that you were looking at a couple condos in Charlotte. Wanted to just get a feel for it and see what you're looking for and what your needs are in regards to the condominiums. And he gave it to me, and he was looking it and he still is, for his personal self when he sells his home here in the area. And from there, we just started building that relationship. And it wasn't just a business relationship. His birthday was actually on Monday, and his wife invited us out. And then he invited us to Asheville in 2 weeks, or in a couple weeks, he invited us to Asheville, my fiance and I. So it's building that relationship. We're on a personal level. I've watched his dog, his kids before. So we're on a very close personal level that he trusts me also to invest in real estate here very heavily.
Okay. So now, he and other investors, like you're keeping this relationship going. What are some other things you're doing? So one thing I see, most of us that are in this business are focused on like the new leads, right? Growing our investor database. But however, we're not very focused on the investors that we already have, right? Sustaining communication with them. And how do you do that? What does that look like just in your day-to-day process, or maybe a weekly or every 2 weeks? How are you doing that?
Yeah, great question. So I think when anyone gets their business, and if for future syndicators who are just starting off, you have to be hungry and you have to reach out to everybody to grow that database. I have 5,000 friends on Facebook, and sometimes when I hit that max, I'll go ahead and delete people from high school. I'll delete people from college. I'll delete people from the past, because I'm worried about growth, and I want all my investors to be top of mind. And really, social media with LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook, you can leverage that to your benefit. And I speak daily motivational videos on Instagram. And from that, any person that follows me or that I friend request and accepts my friend request, they get a personal message from me. Yes, it takes a lot of time, but they get a personal message from me asking to connect and wanting to set up a phone call so I can dig more deeper into that person.
So anybody that connects on Facebook or any social
media platform,
they're gonna get a personal message from you.
Bigger Pockets, any social media platform, they'll get a personal message from me, and I'll dig deep into what they're doing, and then I'll set up a phone call to build that relationship with them. And then from there, the thing we just spoke about is staying consistent and following up. That's the biggest thing, is staying consistent and following up. So in a couple weeks, just shooting them a text, hey, I hope all is well, and digging deeper into that previous conversation. So I think that's extremely important.
Now, do you have assistants that are helping with some of that, or are you doing all that personally?
No, personally, I'm doing all that, but I am definitely going to pick your brain when it comes to it, to get the virtual assistants to do that. But I feel that, and coming from running a company and training salespeople, I know the market better than my assistant does. Mm-hmm. I know Charlotte, North Carolina better than my assistant does. I know multifamily better than my assistant does. So I can, when I speak to them, Yes, an assistant can help, and I can train them to a certain level to get that initial call with them. But I just feel that it's me, with me personally. They know it's me personally, and I have that market knowledge and that expertise that they feel that and they see that when the message comes across.
Nice. So, all right, we'll take a kind of a pivot here, Chris, and go to some other questions. But
Yeah.
but would you elaborate on just your buying criteria? You know, when you're speaking to a broker and they say, "Okay, Chris," you know, obviously they're testing you a little bit or
Very much.
interviewing you a little bit. But what's your answer? You know, say, you know, they're asking you what you're looking for, your buying criteria.
Yeah, buying criteria is over 100 units, Class B and C value add assets. Like I said, Charlotte, North Carolina is a market we are heavily focusing on, but we do have Greenville, South Carolina, Raleigh, North Carolina, and Greensboro, North Carolina on our radar as well. But right now, Charlotte is a flourishing market. It has substantial growth right now, and there's no need to step outside currently.
What are some like initial deal breakers for you? You know, looking at a property, what are maybe some things that are like, okay, this has to happen, or this has to be there before I'm going to pursue this property?
Yeah, great question. So definitely it has to be over 100 units. I definitely, from doing the 44 units and the headaches that we came across with that, that definitely made sure that my criteria got very strict. So it's definitely over 100 units. And it depends on the value add. I'm taking a look at 201 units in Charlotte here tomorrow, and that's a full heavy lift value add. So all units will be have to be renovated, and that right there, I don't know if I would want to pursue that just because of the time frame that will take. Who knows what's going to happen in 2-3 years with the market. So that one right there will definitely be one I'll take into consideration. But it has to come down to the lift, the value add, the lift. Location has to be perfect. And knowing my market with Charlotte, I know the location. If you send me the address, I know the location. I can say yes or no right there. So location is really the number one thing when it comes to it, especially here in the Charlotte area, because you'll be able to charge your rent premiums depending on the location that you're in.
What's been the hardest part of this syndication journey for you? I know you had a career or, you know, years in residential, you know, selling single family, and now you moved to multifamily, but what's been the hardest part for you?
Yeah, I think the hardest part, I would say, is when I first got in is gaining all the knowledge. And I think that's very important before you hop into any career, is soak up all the knowledge as possible. When I first got in, I met Dan Hampford. I know a lot of people know him. When I first got into the business, I met Dan and his team, and I knew that he was acquiring properties an hour and 40 minutes away from Charlotte. So what I did was every two to three times a week, I asked Dan if I could go out to his property so I can just soak up as much knowledge and just be a fly on the wall to understand the process. So I think even though it took me to where I'm at today, we're still always understanding and gaining more knowledge in the multifamily space, which I like. That's one reason why I love multifamilies, because it's always different. It's not going to be the same thing. Each transaction's different. And I like to see it as each property we acquire is a failing business. Not necessarily failing, but maybe not as profitable as we'd like it. So I get to go in there and tweak little things to make it extremely profitable for our investors.
Nice. And obviously I can't speak highly enough of Dan, and it's awesome that you're that close and we're able to get connected with somebody like that to help you get started in this business. But tell me, what's another way that you educated yourself, that really helped you just quickly understand the lingo or just the business in general?
Hiring a coach. I used to coach, and I knew going into and making that transition. I hired my coach actually in December of last year. And I told my coach, I said, 6 months, I'm done selling real estate. And he says, I'm gonna hold you to it. And I hold myself very highly accountable. And 1 month later, February 1st, I said, I'm done selling real estate. I'm full-time in a multifamily. He says, are you sure? I said, let's go. Because the way I see it is I work best when my back's against the wall. And if my back's against the wall and I'm under pressure, I know I will go ahead and reach 100 people a day or 100 people a week to get my name out there, to talk to people, to make those brokers relationships, and to acquire properties.
Nice. Nice. So, what is the way that you have recently improved your business that we could all apply to ours?
I would say reading books and just soaking up as much knowledge as possible. Believe it or not, being in all the closed Facebook groups, you can just soak up as much knowledge by other people just asking simple questions about multifamily, about what their issue is or anything like that. Just reading through those questions and answers and soaking up as much knowledge as possible. I think knowledge is power, and it's key, especially when speaking to investors and knowing your market. So I would say definitely read multifamily books. Also read business books, because each property that is a value add, and really each property you acquire, is its own separate business. So you have to have the fundamentals to know how to operate a business to make it extremely profitable.
Nice. Do you have a book that you've recently read that you would recommend?
Right now, I'm reading Multifamily Millions. I'm reading that book and digging deep into that book. And the previous book I read was Self-Made Billionaires, and that was really honing down on, a gentleman did a study on, I believe it was 100 billionaires, and personally interviewed them, and they all had a couple traits in common. And that's one, they never gave up, and they stayed consistent with their business. And they did not diverse to other paths. They just stayed in their one path, and they never gave up.
Who are the authors of those books? Do you know?
I can send that to you. I don't know off the top of my head, but I can send that to you.
Okay.
Post it in the comments.
How do you consume your books? Is it mostly physically reading? Is it Audible? How do you?
Great question. I have to physically read the book. I have to physically read it. Audible, I'll start, if I'm driving, I'll start to zone out and not listen to it. And then I'll have to keep rewinding because I heard of something great. So it's physical. I do it. I meditate as well, early in the mornings and in the evening times. So right before or right after I meditate, I read the book as well.
Okay. Chris, what's the number one thing that's contributed to your success?
I would say building relationships, strong relationships with you, Whitney, with a lot of other business owners. Excuse me, building strong relationships with them.
Nice. And how do you like to give back?
I like to give back my time. Spending time with kids that are autistic and that need help. Also with the Humane Society, the local Humane Society here. I love animals. I love dogs and cats. So I always love giving back my money and my time to them to make sure those little furry animals are still making us happy.
Awesome. Chris, you've been a great guest. I can't thank you enough for your time and sharing with the listeners and elaborating on how you have, even acquired a property off market recently because of the relationships that you've been able to develop and how you've done that. But I know the listeners have learned a lot from you and probably want to reach out to you. So tell them how they can connect.
Yes. Thank you, Whitney. You can connect on my website, qccapitalgroup.com, or you can email me directly at chris@qccapitalgroup.com. I am on all social medias. I'm very heavily active on Instagram, where I do daily motivational videos, and that's at Chris_Salerno_.
Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Syndication Show, brought to you by Life Bridge Capital. Life Bridge Capital works with investors nationwide to invest in real estate, while also donating 50% of its profits to assist parents who are committing to adoption. Life Bridge Capital, making a difference, one investor and one child at a time. Connect online at www.lifebridgecapital.com for free material and videos to further your success.